Namaste and welcome everyone to this continuation of a nasscom GCC Conclave series. India's Global Capability Centers, or GCCs, stand at a pivotal juncture, a point where the transformation into strategic powerhouses is redefining not only the Indian corporate landscape, but also influencing global business paradigms. The GCC market in India has grown by leaps and bounds, and today we have over 1,700 GCCs in the country, with a market size of over $64 billion as of financial year 2024. The GCC talent today stands at over 1.9 million, and they continue to lead in innovations in digital technologies, including AI, big data and analytics, IoT, cybersecurity, and robotics. This is not merely a testament to India's vast talent pool, but also reflects the country's growing capabilities to deliver high-end engineering, complex R&D, and strategic business services. As these GCCs mature, they are increasingly shaping global agendas, steering strategic decision-making, and also leading to global roles coming in from India. And just a bit of statistics from our nasscom Insights team. According to them, global roles from India have risen to over 6,500 in 2024, and it is expected to rise to 30,000 by 2030. Out of the 6,500, 1,100 are women leadership roles, which is also growing tremendously and is expected to grow to over 7,500 by 2030. Today's discussion topic is a deep dive into the topic of global roles from India, and it is titled From Desi Hustle to Global Muscle, Redefining Leadership in GCCs. And we have with us today Arindam Sen, partner and GCC Sector Leader, Technology, Media and Entertainment and Telecommunications from EY India. In this session, we will hear his views on the leadership evolution at GCCs in India and what's next for GCCs. Welcome on board, Arindam.
Thank you, Sandeep. Good to be here.
Arindam, thank you for joining us for this conversation. And so it's so apt to have you here because not so far back in time, you held a global role at Schneider Electric, and now you are helping GCCs in the transformation journeys. And I think your role at Schneider, your role at EY will help us gain a lot of insights, and also share it with our peers. So let's deep dive straight into the conversation with our volley of questions. Shall we? Great. My first question to you, Arindam, is as India-based GCCs take on more strategic roles, we are seeing a real shift that's taking place. How do you think this is changing the global leadership dynamic? Over to you.
Yeah, so I think, Sandeep, what's happening is, and you know this better than anyone else, as GCC ecosystem in India is maturing, it is now evident that the leadership in GCCs are gradually being nurtured and, let's say, encouraged to take more and more global leadership roles in the future. Now, what that basically entails for the companies that actually have centers in the country, they cannot ignore the fact that they have these centers which are an integral part of their, for a lack of better term, delivery network. And for the next line of leadership or the pipeline of leadership, they absolutely must look at these centers to be able to identify and groom the right kind of talent to take up any leadership role of the future. Now, what that does is it does change to a large degree the way you think about your leadership pipeline, which to a large degree was concentrated before on Western countries or the hub countries, are now being expanded. And this is more also bringing about a change from a talent developing philosophy, where the expansion beyond hub countries and Western countries are now also including these GCCs or set service centers that these companies have, to be able to look at talent much more broadly and then identify the right people that could fit potential roles of the future, right? So I think the dynamic that is changing is a little bit of a wider reach, a little bit of a wider perspective to not only look at hub locations, but beyond hub locations to be able to identify those leadership talents of the future.
Excellent. And just the question is, where is the competition to India for talent coming in from the GCC side in terms of different countries? Where do you see that happening from?
So I think, look, in terms of GCCs itself, India absolutely dominates the landscape, right? If you look at where we stand vis-a-vis Latin America, Eastern Europe, parts of Asia, I think we are way ahead in terms of the GCC ecosystem. But talent is not necessarily restricted only to the GCC ecosystem. They are, for large companies, there's talent everywhere in pretty much every country of the world, right? So when it comes to talent and competition for talent, we are effectively competing with every other country that is there in the world in terms of position, right? Now, it just so happens that as some companies are globalizing more and more and are looking at locations which they had potentially not looked at before in terms of incorporating talent into leadership positions, the GCCs are automatically getting included in that charter. So the compete is every other country. I just feel that people here might have a little bit of an upper hand given the fact that they're so deeply entrenched in terms of understanding the company's practices, what it stands for, its values, its culture. They're just probably a little more better suited than someone who's sitting in a remote sales office very far away from the hub location. So I think there is a little bit of an advantage, but I wouldn't say it's probably the only factor that goes into choosing this kind of talent. So the compete is pretty much every other country.
Okay, excellent. Let's come back into the numbers that I talked about at the start of the conversation, which was 6,500 roles sitting out here. So roughly we're looking at about Indian leaders now contributing about 20-25% of critical global business decision making, which is a huge leap from where we started.
Right.
What do you think has driven this rapid rise in influence coming in from India?
I think probably a couple of things. One is the reduction in the level of skepticism that existed 5-6 years back on the capability of these centers that are existing in the country to be able to make decisions in an autonomous manner. I think if you went back and you know this well, 10, 12, 15 years, and it's a different decade, it's a different GCC world at that time. I think to a large degree, there was a lot of skepticism in terms of whether these centers could actually own and deliver on this. Now, what we have seen and the way things have evolved, I think everyone's a lot more comfortable in terms of the leadership here to be able to make this. Now, this is not, and I want to emphasize, this is not applicable to every single company. There are still companies that don't necessarily have decision-making decentralized to the extent that some other companies have done. But that is a very big, or it's very much a factor of how the company perceives these shared service centers, right? It's like part of their culture, it's part of their decision-making, hierarchical proxies, and so on and so forth. So every company is different. But for the largest part, I think you're seeing more and more of that kind of autonomous decision-making happening here because now the belief and the trust has been established. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why this change has been so dramatic and has been growing is because the centers are quite large. The centers are quite integral to what the company does. The company understands and trusts the personnel that exists in these centers and also understand that it is very important for the center to be able to make certain choices to be able to deliver on the outcomes that they promised. It is nearly impossible at times to be able to make those choices centrally and have it pushed down on the centers and expect them to deliver on outcomes based on a choice that has been made by someone else. So I think a little bit of that give and take, a little bit of that increase in trust, a little bit of that understanding has gone a long way in really tipping the scale in terms of decision making, and that's why you see the figures.
Yeah. Arindam, what's your message to the organizations that still haven't shifted base to India?
When you say shifted base to India, have not set up
As
centers,
in,
or
as not having their GCCs in India as yet.
I mean, look, I think we are at a point today where, and this has happened post COVID and during the COVID times, where this model of establishing a GCC and running a bunch of activities in-house is well proven. It has been proven now for many years. It just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you do have challenges on cost efficiency, if you do have challenges in terms of fragmented operations and you want to centralize, if you want to build anything at scale, if you want to hire talent that is very much required for today's world and everything that companies want to do from an emerging tech perspective, this is the way to go. This is probably one of the best decisions you would make. And given the ecosystem, not only of partners, advisors, and everything else that exists today, which has matured with the GCC ecosystem, companies should pretty much have a very clear plug and play model available to them to come into the country, set up a center, get it scaled up, and run it very quickly. I think the realization of benefits as well has now a much shorter time frame than what it had before, right? So now is probably the best time if you're thinking about it and if there is a need. And again, Sandeep, there has to be a need as to why you want to do it. Not because everyone else is doing it, it's because you must have one of the needs, because that will ultimately drive what you want the center to do.
True. Okay. Let's come back into the conversation related to all the global leadership roles that you've talked about. There's going to be a huge next wave of leadership coming on terms of leadership roles coming out of India. I think we're going to hear a lot more of global CIOs, CTOs, CFOs
Right.
coming into India. And from your perspective, Arindam, how do you see these roles evolving, and what impact do you think that they will have on the parent company, on the enterprise?
So I think, look, the roles, and as you mentioned, I mean, we already have companies that have CIOs in India. We already have some companies that have maybe not the full-fledged version of a CTO, but definitely a significant part of what a CTO does. You definitely have, to a large degree, second in line to CFOs in many of these sectors. So I think those changes have happened, are happening as we speak, and they're evolving. Now, what this, to your, I think, earlier point, I think to a large degree, these roles today in GCCs will have to evolve into these, because you know that a GCC is limited in terms of the number of people it has, the number of leadership positions it has. When you have good talent, you need to give them an ability to grow further and maybe sometimes beyond the center, right? And that's exactly what's happening. As a GCC is maturing, talent that you have who stuck around with you, who understand the culture, who understand the ways of working in the company, that have been there for, I don't know, 10, 12, 30 years, are now ready to take on the next challenge, but are not necessarily ready to relocate, right? Earlier on, what used to happen is once a person has reached a certain threshold as far as the GCC career is concerned, automatically the very next step was for them to relocate out of the country and go to another hub location to be able to take on a different role. But I think what has changed, given the maturity of the center, the fact that India itself is growing at a tremendous pace, the fact that there are there is a clear understanding today that you can make critical decisions out of these centers. People are evolving to take on those global roles, sitting in the center itself, right? It is not uncommon today to hear, and I've done it in my past, where you are sitting here and managing teams globally. You are not necessarily restricted to the teams that are operating the center only. Right? This is very different from the past, where the only way to move forward in that company was to relocate. Right? So I think as a natural process of the evolution of the centers, the leadership talent itself will also evolve. As they take on much larger roles, the GCCs itself gain prominence because a lot of those roles will sit in these centers. And ultimately, it will drive the 20 to 25% number that you spoke about critical decision making even higher, right? So it's a little bit of a cycle. GCCs mature, people mature, they evolve, they take global roles, they're in the same center, they drive decisions, those decisions are being taken from the centers, and we're back in that sort of a flow. So one's a natural consequence of the other. So the evolution is bound to happen. It will continue to happen as long as these centers continue to mature.
So just taking a thread from there, we have talked about the rosier side, saying that numbers go up. But there are always challenges in this whole leadership pipeline debate process. So in your entire experience, what are some of the biggest hurdles and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is always a big hurdle and again brings that kind of a doubt, will this person be able to do this kind of a role, etc. If you take the some of the roles that you mentioned, Sandeep, CIO, CTO, CFO, they do need a broader understanding of the business itself, right? They do need an understanding of how every division within the company operates, of how to navigate the overall, and for large companies, it's even more complex. How to deal with, complexities such as mergers and acquisitions, how to understand, complexities of, I don't know, internal technology, whatever the case may be. I think companies that are large are increasingly more complex to them. Now, what the biggest challenge that someone in a GCC sometimes faces is that they have a very narrowed down vision of what the company is, right? So their vision has been very much restricted to what the GCC itself has focused on, right? So if it was a financial service center, a subset of the finance activities are being done out of the GCC. If it's a tech center, which is a much smaller scale tech center, you have a subset of the tech capabilities. You are not generally gaining the experience of the length and breadth of everything that is happening in the company. And sometimes that kind of knowledge is very important as you take on these C-level roles. So I think the biggest challenge and the hurdle that has to be crossed at times is person may be very capable, may be very competent, probably fits every single value box that the company has, but is a little short on the understanding of the length and breadth of everything that the company does. So I think as probably a precursor step, sometimes it is required for you to transition out of a GCC role, maybe gain experience elsewhere in the company, and then come back and take a leadership role, which is very much sitting in the center. But what that entails is gives you a broader perspective, helps you be better positioned in the role, and then establishes you to be more successful. Rather than someone just because they're part of the GCC have reached a certain threshold in the career at plucked and put into a C-level role where they might eventually not succeed because they don't understand everything. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that any GCC leadership field is going to have in terms of transitioning into a C-level role. I think the second part that still exists is skepticism that you need to be in a hub location to be in one of those fields. I'm not saying it's gone away, it's still there. Probably diminished to a large degree, but it's still very much there. These roles are, even though are based in the center and based out of India, have a significant amount of travel associated with those roles. Sometimes it can be very challenging for people to keep up with that kind of travel because if you have a global role, you need to be in multiple locations at times. So I think there's a combination of things that are there. I'm not saying that they are going to inhibit the evolution that we spoke about, but people have to be cognizant about those things. And I think the biggest challenge still is understanding the length and breadth. understanding the culture, knowing how to navigate the company. And sometimes it's nearly impossible to do that if you spend all your life in one sector.
Fantastic answer there, Arindam. And my key takeaway is that everybody's vision has to be broadened, and people have to have a better understanding of the business of the organization in order to become better leaders within the organization. And I think that will go a long way in polishing talent and also creating a huge pipeline for India as we go along. So we have come to the end of the conversation, Arindam, and we usually have a little fun part. We've had a very serious conversation, and now we're going to get into the rapid fire section. Very
Sure.
quick answers. Are you ready on that, Arindam?
Sure, let's do it.
So, brilliant. So, Arindam, if you would describe your leadership style in one word, what would it be?
Collaborate.
Okay, brilliant. What's the most unconventional lesson you've learned about leadership?
Oh, that's a tough one. Sometimes you've got to take up a piece of work that nobody wants to do to shine and ultimately get the role that you want. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. So, Arindam, which book or person has had the most significant impact on your leadership journey so far?
There have been many, but
Name one.
I think to a large degree, it's been my first manager that I ever had in my life. He was an American. His name is Ken Labrie. I think there are a couple of things that he taught me upfront. One is the importance of ethics in what you do. So truthful no matter what. And the second thing is to manage. I think to be calm under pressure. I wouldn't say I have learned everything perfectly, but to a large degree, those are the top two things that, and I think to a large degree, it has stuck to me through my entire career.
Excellent. It's similar to a Dhoni situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's that one piece of advice you'd give to aspiring GCC leaders?
I think to be patient, to be honest. This is the journey, as we already discussed. It does take you through several ups and downs. A lot of people leave it halfway and switch. Sometimes it's best to stick with the company because the growth will come. The companies generally will reward you, A, for your loyalty and your breadth of experience. Obviously, you have to be competent, but sometimes that patience is required, right? Most people believe that they plateau out and they need to move on and so on and so forth. But there are always avenues available in every company. You just have to be patient to find the right next job for you to do.
Excellent. So, Arindam, do you read a lot of Marvel or DC comics, or have you read them while growing up?
I have,
but
I watch more of the movies, I guess.
So if you had a superpower as a leader for a day, what would it be?
Probably be the Hulk.
Okay, why?
Why?
The Hulk gets angry and then transforms himself, and you just mentioned about being calm, so that's kind of contradictory.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes when you're sitting in Bangalore traffic, you do want to become. And I have sat in traffic and thought, what if I could convert myself and move all the cars away so that we could. But hey, look, that's I mean, I love for no particular reason.
Fantastic answer. I love that. I'm going to be in Bangalore next week, so I'm going to go through the grind. But Arindam, on that note, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and experiences.
You're welcome.
Really enjoyed the conversation, and I wish we had more time. and we would have carried on. Just for everyone's awareness and knowledge, I've been talking to Arindam for literally a decade, and we have been talking about various aspects of the GCC journey, leadership, and have had mesmerizing conversations always. And this is another one of it. And I'm sure there'll be opportunities, Arindam, to also have you back on the GCC platform to have these conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
very
to
much,
our
Sandeep.
audience, thank you so much for joining us for this very important conversation. And we hope that these insights will help you in your leadership journeys going ahead. We have a host of other videos on our nasscom YouTube channel. Please subscribe, soak in all the learnings from all our events, including our flagship event, NTLF, which is coming up on 24th, 25th of February. Join us in Mumbai for that. It's one big event, which will have close to 1,500 to 1,600 people, leaders from all over the world coming and talking about the future. And as always, we would really appreciate your feedback, and you can write to us at events@nasscom.in. Interestingly, a lot of those questions are in them to you came in from the viewers. So I think our feedback email ID is working as such. So continue to stay in, everybody, back home for more discussions on a nasscom GCC Conclave series. Have a great day, festive times ahead, and look forward to meeting you soon. Thank you so much. Bye for now. And thanks once again, Arun.
Thank you so much.